Hello, this is Professor Andrew Arroyo, and I want to take you through this presentation to reinforce, not to replace, but to reinforce what we already have gone through in the Creating Your Research Statement assignment. What I want to do in this presentation is talk a little bit more about the importance of going empirical rather than practical. I want to talk a little bit about what happens when we fail to align our statements properly with each other. And I want to take you through a bit of an exercise to help you to edit and prepare and format your research statements before you submit them for a grade. So make sure that you've already at least completed a draft of your research statements. So let's talk a little bit about this issue of why not be practical. Our knee-jerk reaction is to want to be practical because we see so many problems, so many issues, so many injustices everywhere around us, and it just seems logical that we would rush in and try to save the day, right? Well, what I want to suggest to you is that it's best to take a step back and to conduct some empirical research when possible, when we are faced with a serious practical problem, whether it's in our classroom, if we're a teacher, whether it's in an organization where we might be a manager or a leader or an employee, wherever it is. If we see a particular practical problem, we don't just want to rush in. We want to take a step back and try to figure out what is at the root of the matter. Now let's talk a little bit about what I mean by research. I'm not talking about your traditional paper that you've been writing ever since you were in middle school. You know, the one where you create a thesis statement, which is basically just your opinion, and then where you jump on the internet and copy and paste some references that fit your opinion and make your argument. Now we're torching that here. What I'm talking about is something completely different. I'm talking about pushing the pause button so that you actually go on an investigation and figure out what the true issues are before you rush in and try to solve them. And I'm going to save you a whole headache, because let's say that you're in an organization and there's an issue. If you just rush in and try to address the issue, you might apply the wrong tool. I mean, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and you end up really hurting things. What if all you have is a hammer, but the problem you actually need to address requires a saw? Good luck. So, by going empirical first, again, it helps us to make sure that we have the proper information in our hands, which essentially translates into giving us the proper tools. Have you ever been in an argument where you have been arguing a case, you've been very impassioned about it, and then suddenly you realize you're wrong? It makes you feel pretty small, doesn't it? Well, when you're in a personal argument with somebody, you can get out of that pretty quickly by simply apologizing. But if you find yourself leading an organization, or really at the top of a food chain, and you rush in and try to address a problem without really thinking through, doing your research, trying to figure out what is the real issue going on here, it's going to take a lot more than an apology to make things right. You might lose your job. And even if you don't lose your job, it's going to take a considerable amount of resources away from you to have to readdress this thing, including large amounts of your personal credibility, which is arguably, along with our time, our greatest commodity. Because if you don't have personal credibility, what do you really have? Okay? So, again, what I want to try to do is get us to step back to a point where we've investigated things so that when a problem arises and we come on the scene, we can be confident. And people can be confident that we are there with the proper answer to address the issue the right way the first time. Okay, so now let's talk about why am I asking you to use the same language in all of these statements? Well, of course, in a real-world research proposal, you would not use the same language. This is a little bit of an artificial assignment that I'm having you do. However, because you're new at this, and so many of your paradigms are shifting, the reason that I'm having you use the same language is to make sure that you are going in one direction with all of your research statements, from your topic to your problem statement to your research question to your purpose of the study, making sure that you're going in one direction. If you break this and if you start using different language, I'm telling you by experience, this is what you're going to end up with. And it's really ugly. You're going to end up with a many-headed monster. And I'm not talking about the cute kind of many-headed monster. I'm talking about this kind of many-headed monster. I've seen it over and over and over again. Now let me just show you what I mean by this. So let's look at three statements, okay? We have a research problem, we have a research question, and we have a purpose of the study. Now, all of these could fall under the topic of homeless veterans. But I want you to notice this. Notice how the blue words change between each statement, and notice how the change of these words literally changes the direction of the study. So the research problem motivating this study is the lack of knowledge regarding the factors that contribute to homelessness among veterans. What your research question should be is, what factors contribute to homelessness among veterans? And your purpose of the study should be, the purpose of the study is to provide new knowledge regarding the factors that contribute to homelessness among veterans. You see, all using the same language. But because we switched the language, now we're talking about factors that contribute to homelessness. Now then in the question we're asking, why don't veterans take advantage of the resources that are available to them? Then in the purpose, we're talking about the purpose is to raise awareness about homelessness among veterans. I have seen this particular example is one that I made up, but I can't tell you how many students I've seen do something similar to this. Now, how many directions do we have going here? Yes, exactly. Again, how many directions do we have going here? You see, I could do this all day long. I'm really trying to drive home a point to you that if you don't pay attention to your language, you are going to end up in multiple directions. And frankly, for me, as the person who's trying to figure out what you're doing, yeah, you can figure it out. It's a handful. So let's dispel with this, and let's make sure that we are all using the same language throughout all three of our statements. Okay, so let's go through an exercise. Here on the right, we have three statements, okay? And they are basically aligned. However, within these statements, there are 6 different errors. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide you with 30 seconds. Now, I know now that 30 seconds is not a very long time, but I'm going to give you 30 seconds to look through these 3 statements, and I want you to try to find as many of those 6 errors between them or within them as you possibly can. So the 30 seconds starts right now. Okay, we're halfway through. You have 15 more seconds. Okay, now how many errors were you able to find? Take just another few seconds and see if you can find any more errors within these three statements before I point them out to you. Alright, so 6 errors within these 3 statements that look basically alike. Now let me just tell you, when I'm reviewing your statements, it is not enough for them to just look basically alike. I want perfection. Now that sounds maybe like a tall order, but think about it. I'm only asking you to write 3 sentences. So if you can't write 3 sentences with no errors whatsoever, then you will not earn an A on this assignment. It'll be impossible for you. You have to be able to write 3 sentences with no errors. Now let's look at these. Here's the first error. Factor should have been factors. The research problem motivating this study is the lack of knowledge regarding the factors that contribute to homelessness among veterans. Now that could be as easy as a typo, but you should catch that kind of typo when you're writing, when you're editing. Let's look at the second one. What are the key factors? Now what's wrong with that? Well, the problem is the word key. The word key does not appear in the research problem. And the word key does not appear in the purpose of the study. The word key only appears in the question. So that key, that word should have been removed. It does not belong. Here's another word that got inserted somehow, and this is very common. So you need to check your statements for this. It got inserted somehow, but it wasn't in either of the other statements, and it's really redundant, so you don't need it anyways. What are the key factors that contribute to homelessness among homeless veterans? Well, that word homeless does not appear before veterans in the research problem or the purpose of the study. So again, unnecessary. The question is missing a question mark. You got to watch all punctuation. Watch for stray commas, watch for missing period, question marks, whatever. Okay. Now here, we're looking at the factors that lead to homelessness. But see, the other statements use the word contribute to homelessness. So it should be the word contribute. And finally, the word veterans is misspelled. Everything counts. Let me show you these statements again side by side with the errors highlighted in red. Okay, so there are many areas to explore. You don't just have to, I don't want you to, just because I said factors, doesn't mean that you have to word your research problem as factors. There are so many different ways to design studies. You could look at the attitudes of homeless veterans. You could look at perspectives of homeless veterans on something. You could look at their daily experiences. You could look at ways that homeless veterans transition back to mainstream society. What I don't want you to do is have real basic research problems that just look at things like the numbers of homeless veterans. Well, that is not actually an empirical research problem that I would want you to deal with, because that's kind of just a basic statistical issue. I want you to really find an area, find a problem that is meaningful to you, and then just make sure that all of your statements align. So if you wanted to look at the attitudes of homeless veterans, the research problem motivating this study is the lack of knowledge regarding the attitudes of homeless veterans. Then your question would be, what are the attitudes of homeless veterans? Purpose statement would be, the purpose of the study is to provide new knowledge regarding the attitudes of homeless veterans. You see how it all aligns. So don't just look for things like factors, but there are a variety of ways that you can approach research, is basically what I'm trying to say. So, and again, your topic shouldn't be homeless veterans. This is just an example. But I'm showing you that there are many, many, many directions that you can go in, but you just have to make sure that whatever direction you go in your problem, everything aligns. So let's do a final check. Number 1, are your statements error-free? Number 2, are your statements empirical rather than practical? And number 3, did you use the proper formatting? Topic, colon, statement of the problem, colon, research question, colon, purpose of the study, colon. And again, go back to the research, to the creating your research statements assignment document that goes into all of this more in depth, and make sure that your formatting is proper. Okay? I hope that this presentation has helped you, and I look forward to reading all of your perfect research statements.